Hello and welcome to Hidden Existence, and it's a researcher's report tonight, and it's coming, both of us are coming all the way from the UK. My guest is I think he's the creator of the Birmingham UFO group. It's Dave. No, he's not. He's going to tell me all about that. It's Dave Hodrien. Welcome, Dave. How are you doing?
Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much.
Good. You'll have to correct me there, but we'll get into that about how you got into the Birmingham UFOs, aliens, contactees. You've been involved in all of that in investigations currently. How did it start for you?
Well, I've always had the calling to be a UFO investigator. I've had a fascination since childhood with the subject. Been to lots of conferences. Still remember, back in my teens, going to conferences and just seeing other speakers talk about cases they'd investigated and being on the front lines with it, and it just fascinated me. And I always wondered back then what that would be like to talk with witnesses directly, the people actually seeing these things. Yeah, I mean, BUFOG actually started in 2017, the Birmingham UFO group. And yeah, I wasn't the original chairman of it. It was started by a couple of other gents. I could have got into investigation before that. I could have. I mean, I had a very big interest in the subject and read all the magazines, watched documentaries, that sort of thing. And regularly went to at least one conference a year. But it was really BUFOG that kind of kick-started the direct investigation side for me. And this is back in late 2007 when the group first came into existence. It was started by a couple of gents called Craig and Mark from Quinton up in middle of Birmingham. And I just came across it online. And me and my brother were two of the first people to sign up to the first members of the group. I just thought it'd be really interesting just to go along to meetings and just meet other people with an interest in the subject who lived in the Birmingham area and who I could just have a good chat with about the subject and see what any experiences they'd had, that sort of thing. And we started going to meetings. It just started in the corner of a pub initially, it was just a kind of get together, and later on sort of moved to a meeting room. But within about 2 months, I was taken on as the investigator for Birmingham UFO group. The chairman at the time, they could see I had a big fascination with the subject and wanted to get actively involved with the group and become the sort of official investigator for the group. So from that point onwards, any cases that were coming in by the sighting report form on the website or by phone call or word of mouth or whatever, they'd pass on to me. This actually started with a case in Kings Winford in North Birmingham, and the witnesses that have been involved with that, it was 4 witnesses, and they'd actually come down the group, lads in the sort of mid-20s, and they, in talking with them, it was absolutely fascinating. They'd basically seen this black octagonal shaped craft just fly right over their heads, and it seemed quite believable, and I thought it'd be interesting to go to the actual place where this took place, to go to the actual location. So I just asked them, could we go along? And after Craig and Mark found out that we were going to do this and just go to the location, they asked me, sort of behind the scenes, they said, would you like to write a case report on the incident and go out there and interview them? So I did exactly that, and I interviewed them. I didn't tell them I was going to interview them, so it was all kept under wraps. When I got out there, I just took them off to one side, one at a time, and spoke with them independently and got them all to draw pictures of this thing and the similarities between their pictures and the descriptions of it. It was immediately obvious that they'd had a real experience and seen something very real, and it was no normal aircraft of any kind. It was quite an extensive sighting. So I wrote up this big case report, and that was it. And that was my first case investigating for the group. So for a couple of years, I was just doing that. I was just investigating for the group. I released many case reports over those couple of years. There was a whole glut of cases came in because the group was obviously quite new, and so lots and lots of cases coming in from Birmingham and from elsewhere in the UK and other countries. We even had some from Birmingham, Alabama, in America, but they thought they were talking with an American group, right. And I'd tell them from the UK, but I still investigated the cases anyway. So in early 2009, they handed over the actual running of the group to me as well. It was really a short-term thing for them. It requires quite a lot of constant dedication to run and maintain a group, and they could see I was the right person to kind of take over the mantle of that from them. So they offered me the position, and I took it. So from that point onwards, from 2009, I've been the chairman for the group as well as the lead investigator. And since then, I've taken on a couple of other investigators who will help occasionally with certain cases. I suppose the majority of the cases still come my way. I dedicate some of my free time to looking into experiences and documenting them.
So do you have people all over the UK that you could get in touch with if you had a sighting in Manchester, say?
Absolutely.
You've got someone.
So, yeah, so about half the cases I deal with are from around the Birmingham and Midlands area. The other half are from anywhere. I've dealt with cases as far wide as Australia, all around the world. I've had cases in,
Okay.
and I'm more than happy to investigate a case from anywhere. Obviously, we live in a world where it's very easy to talk to people directly on Skype or similar to how we're doing now. So there's no bearing with the location. It's absolutely fine. Obviously, I can't visit the location to take photographs, but I can ask the witness to send photographs to and that sort of thing, and do drawings. So we can build up quite extensive investigations without actually visiting the person directly. So that's not really an issue. And it is a worldwide subject. It's going on everywhere. So I don't like to dismiss cases just because they're away from the area of Birmingham.
Exactly. So on average, how many calls do you get? How many reports do you get monthly, say, or? It's
very, very, very variable. You can get like a glut of sort of 5 to 10 calls that will come in over a number of weeks, and then it might be really quiet. And you might have some months where you only get sort of 1 or 2 emails coming through, and not all those cases are new cases either. So some of the cases I deal with are historical cases. So somebody will have seen something back in the 70s or 80s or whatever, and they just want to report it. Why they left it so long, there's various reasons. There's numerous reasons for why people might do that. We could go into that if you wish, but yeah, they get in touch usually through word of mouth. We've been going now for 12 years, and we're probably one of the most active UK-based groups, I would say, that's most dedicated to releasing detailed case reports.
I'd never heard of you. I'd never know. I mean, I'm only 2.5 hours away from, but I hadn't really a clue about UFOs. Obviously, I know there's stuff going around, but I didn't realize there was actually a group like this until a few weeks ago. I think it's like we were saying before, people don't know where to go to report and hold this information. Can be for years and years, and until suddenly they find, oh, there's something online, or like you say, word of mouth. So I wonder how many other accounts are out there, and people just don't know where to leave them.
What we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, the accounts that make it out into the public, of which there are thousands now going back over the last century or so. They're documented and they get released, but there's so many more out there. A lot of people just keep the experiences to themselves. It's just something that happened to them. It's personal to them. They might lock it away at the back of their mind and get on with their life and never tell anybody about it ever again. They may share it with family members or friends, but go no further than that. They might feel they've got that they're going to be ridiculed. There's a general portrayal of the subject. This is widely helped by the media's portrayal of it over the years. That it's a laughing matter. It's a bit of a joke. Ooh, little green man. Ooh. And the people get this feeling that if they talk about it, they're going to be laughed at, or they might go down a kind of more paranoid route and be afraid that they're going to get in trouble if they talk about it. Sort of Men in Black are going to knocking at their door or whatever. So there's some people who kind of fear talking about what's happened to them because of that. But more often than not, it's the ridicule. This subject, I know some people kind of see it as a bit of a joke, but when you're investigating this on the front lines, you see a whole other side to it. Yeah, I've seen families broken apart because of this. Because somebody will have an experience and the spouses or the kids or whatever don't believe them, and it's caused rifts in the family. I've seen that. I've seen people with ongoing, lasting trauma from experiences they've had. They get regular panic attacks. Ongoing depression because of it. And when you see those sides to it, it brings home the reality of what's happening here with this.
People are definitely experiencing something that's created that trauma. A loss of time is another one, isn't it, for people?
That's a biggie. The missing time thing is very interesting because I believe it's done on purpose, by the way. We can get more into that, but it's something which people can't deal with, because there'll be a gap in their memory, and they just can't work out what's happened there. I've seen that where, let's say, a husband's gone out, has had an experience, wife's remained back home. He comes back, he's like, I've been gone 10 minutes. So they're like, no, you've been gone an hour and a half, and the confusion that caused.
Yeah,
I've seen that numerous times with people when talking with them, and how confusing that can be. I believe that what's going on with this subject is happening largely covertly, and I believe that the missing time thing is something that is done on purpose, so that people can. They're trying to allow people to go on with their lives and not realise what's happened to them. And this primarily focuses on the contact side of the subject. For those listening in, when I'm talking about abductions, the alien abductions, I am getting widely known as one of the sort of leading researchers in the contact field in the UK. It's an aspect of the subject that's particularly interesting to me, and I've dealt with over 300 contact cases now from around the globe. The similarities between these cases that come out is astounding, absolutely astounding, and it's really going on a worldwide level. This, but the missing time element, that's just one element of that. But it usually, when people have a sighting and they see sort of a UFO up in the sky, usually won't have any missing time with that. You usually get the missing time aspect occur where there's direct interaction, contact.
Yeah.
As it's known.
So if you're saying that they're giving the creating this missing time so they don't have to deal with what's happened, what about when these people are getting the downloads and suddenly
so they don't always block out the memories. So some people have full recollections without any missing time. Other people have got they can remember partial bits of it here and there. So it's quite variable. I believe that it really works on a sort of trust level, and that they allow them to experience and remember their experiences if they feel that the individual is kind of ready for that. There are other aspects of the contact subject that also work on a similar principle. I don't know if you've heard talk of screen memories, or do you know what that is?
No.
Screen memory. Okay,
can I just ask you, Dave? Sorry, can you come a little bit closer just for the sound? I think.
Sorry, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
That'd be better. Yeah.
Is that better in the chat? Can people hear better? Let me know. Let us know.
Okay. So the another aspect of contact is the screen memory phenomena, as it's known. Now, these beings seemingly have the ability to mask either their own appearance or even the appearance of their craft, so that when people remember about the experience, they don't remember seeing them in their own form. They'll see something else. They can quite often remember seeing doctors, or clowns. Sometimes it's animals of particular types, owls, quite common, or wolves. And other times it's like a family member or something else familiar to the person. Now, this often happens in childhood, and then later on, when they get older, if they're experiencing contact regularly throughout their life. Some of the cases I deal with go right back to childhood, and they'll have a lot of experiences throughout their life. And you can see over time, those experiences change a lot of the time. And in the early days, they'll appear to them, and they'll remember a sort of screen memory. So, for example, I dealt with a case in Australia, actually, where the gentleman remembered seeing Elmer Fudd, out of the Bugs Bunny cartoon. Right. That's what he remembers seeing. The beings were disguising themselves as Elmer Fudd when he was a child, probably because he liked that cartoon character or whatever. And that's what he remembers seeing. When he was older, he saw the beings as they actually were. They came to him in their proper appearance, and it's almost like it's done on purpose. Like they, later on, they feel that he's okay to deal with them in their actual form. With the craft thing as well, I've dealt with cases where there's a case from up in Blackpool, actually. This is a real interesting one. So the girl remembered a silver helicopter landing in a school playground, and a pilot getting out with sort of full pilot helmet and everything on, and black shades. He invites her for a ride in his helicopter. And it doesn't make logical sense, does it? So she goes in, she gets in the helicopter, and she remembers flying around with this part, and then dropping back off in the playground. So she'd always had this memory, but she knew that wasn't right. That didn't seem to. It's just so illogical that would happen. And later on, when she was older, she looked into being hypnotized, hypnotically regressed. Now, hypnosis, I know it's quite controversial, and I'm fully aware that false memories can be implanted with hypnosis, but I believe that sometimes it can be used to sort of fill in blocks of memory. And one of the things it can be used to do is to break past these screen memories, and I've seen that happen directly on regressions that I've sat in on. So the person under regression won't see the screen memory; they'll see the actual form of the being. Now, she was regressed and taken back to that situation, and what she described as a silver-colored saucer landing and a grey getting out. That's the guys with the big black eyes.
Wow.
And it was putting on this persona of a pilot and a helicopter. So when she remembered it back, it was something more normal for her. It's quite fascinating. There's numerous ideas as to what could be going on with that. Whether it's something that we're doing with our brain, associating it with something familiar. Whether it's something they're doing, are they doing it for a good reason or nefarious reasons? And I'm actually working on a new lecture at the moment that's going to solely focus on the screen memory phenomena, because it's a particular aspect of contact that I find very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and it could be a bit of the two, couldn't it? You know, how the brain's working and how. So, why do you think? What do you think is the connection that these people that are having experiences with them, it continues into adulthood? Is this some sort of? Is it a personal connection? Is there something special about all these people? Do they have anything in common?
Sometimes. What I believe is going on is an ongoing program. I think it's been going on for a long time, and it's continuing to go on. What you'll see in observations on numerous cases is following of a particular bloodline. So you'll see it down one side of a family tree. So the grandmother might have contact experiences, and the mother and the daughter. And then the husband, father, whatever, they might be involved. Other members of the family might be involved, kind of indirectly. So they've seen things because they've been around the person experiencing contacts. But what it points towards, I believe, is an ongoing program linking in with our genetics, and they are seeing how our genetics change over sort of multiple generations. Some people go deeper than that and believe that they're potentially altering our DNA in certain ways, undetectable, by our sort of normal science or whatever, over a long period of time, like an ongoing experiment. And if you look at it that way, then that's the reason why they don't land on the White House lawn, because they've got no reason to, because they're working away in the background and doing what they're doing. There are other aspects of contact which are quite controversial and very, very hard to grasp. People, I mean, we're getting into really deep stuff now, but the hybrid program that's going on, basically what these beings appear to be doing, specifically the greys, they seem to be taking human DNA and mixing it with their own and making these hybrid babies from that. Now, it sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? It sounds like the stuff of sci-fi movies, yeah? But I've dealt with many cases involving women who've had proper recollections of having these babies brought to them. So they'll create them, and then they'll often bring them back to them at a later time, almost like trying to establish some sort of mother-daughter or mother-son connection. And they'll allow them to hold the baby for a period of time, and then they'll take it back off them, and that can often lead to deep trauma.
So they're taking the woman's embryos,
yeah,
and implanting alien whatever.
Taking them out of them, growing a broad craft. So quite a lot of abductees report seeing these kind of glass sort of cylinders with fetuses inside. Sometimes they look fully human, sometimes they look sort of partial human alien. So the babies look quite sort of humanoid, but they've got completely black eyes, usually reduced hair, etc. So an exact half and half mix between how we would look. Sometimes they've got irises in instead of black eyes, so they've got some more. There's lots of different sort of subtypes that come out through cases. In the same way that the human species has lots of different subtypes. They come in lots of different heights and colors and everything. So just as with lots of species.
So can we go into a bit more detail about that? How what's happening to these women? Are they being taken off? Are they all different experiences, or?
The experiences are quite varied when looking at the whole thing back to back. but each experience, each thing is repeated across lots of different cases. So there's very few cases where everything will happen to a person, but quite a lot of the time, many of the aspects do occur, and that goes for not only what's occurring both before and after the experiences, as well as what's actually taking place during the experience. It's really, really fascinating. There's all sorts of unusual aspects to contact, and some ufologists steer clear completely from it, because it's too weird. There's too many odd aspects with it. There's a very odd time distortion element that goes on. For example, they seem to be able to kind of shut down the area that so if they're going to visit somebody to sort of take them, whatever, they seem to be able to shut down the area. So other people in the area will kind of go into a sort of trance-like state. So I've dealt with many people where they've said they've tried waking up their partner or whatever, lying in the bed next to them, and they won't wake up no matter how hard they shake and hit them, shout at them. I've dealt with other cases where people have seen people in this trance-like state actually aboard the craft. So they've been taken off to this other location, almost certainly aboard an actual craft. I mean, they're inside usually, but sometimes there's windows and they can see stars or clouds outside the window. But they'll see other people on the craft also in a sort of trance-like state. So you get the same things will occur again and again and again with it. It doesn't always involve an abduction. Some contact experiences are what's known as a visitation, which is where they'll see beings in their environment, either in their bedroom or they'll appear in the road in front of them while they're outside or whatever. So, but they don't feel like they've been abducted or taken anywhere else. And maybe in some cases they haven't, and maybe in other cases they have, but they've had the memories completely blocked out. And we'll talk with that, because some of the cases I want to share with you, that when we start going into a case specifics, you'll see a lot of these aspects that we're talking about right now come out in them. Absolutely fascinating.
Well, do you want to go into one then? Do you want to start off? Sorry, my dog's making a right racket behind me. I'm just going to shut it.
It's all right.
Right. Well, do you want to start with one?
Yeah, I'll start with the recent work that I'm doing on the Abergavenny UFO photograph, because it's quite interesting, and it's been taking up a bit of my time recently with this. So this goes back to the case actually occurred in 2014, and I put out the case report on our website in 2016. It's been live a number of years. And let me take you through what happened with that. So it took place in Abergavenny in Wales, and it was a lovely, bright, sunny day, lovely blue sky. And a gentleman by the name of Lee, he was just outside in the garden, just playing fetch with his dog, and he throws the ball or whatever, and in doing so glances up at the sky, and in the distance, he can see what appears to be a dark grey looking disc-shaped object. It's just hovering there, motionless in the sky. He estimated it was about sort of 50 to 70 feet in diameter, if it was at the distance that he thought it was. So and it was just hovering there without moving. So he stares at it about a minute, and then his wife arrives home from work. She comes out back, and he tries pointing it out to her. Oh, here we go. Yeah. He tries pointing it out to her, and
it's up here. It's tiny. I'm just going to zoom in. There we go.
So she can't actually see it. I think we've got a zoomed in shot of it in a minute. She can't actually see it because it's in the distance like that. She didn't have her glasses on, so because she couldn't see it, he runs into the house to get his camera. So he didn't have the camera on him at the time, which is why he hadn't taken a photo in the last minute. He runs inside, gets his digital camera, it's a Fujifilm camera, runs back outside and snaps a shot. He's trying to zoom in on it, but he said it was coming out of focus when he zoomed in. So he did a wide shot, which is what you can see there. That photograph is what he took. He looks down at the camera screen to show his wife it and zoom in on the camera screen. They look back up a second later, no objects, completely vanished. So that's why there's only one photograph. Now that particular aspect is in no way suspicious. I've dealt with case after case after case where these things will just go like that. Sometimes people will see them leave and they'll just see them zip away really, really fast, or even just seemingly blink out and there 1 second, gone the next. A lot of the time, though, it's almost like they're doing it on purpose. Yeah, there's quite a few cases I've dealt with where people, there's a zoomed in picture of it, where people will they'll look away for a second, and when they look back, it's gone. It's almost like it's waiting for that moment to disappear, almost like it knows that it almost looks like like it knows that they're looking away at that particular moment, which is fascinating. And I wouldn't say that that was a thing if it hadn't occurred again and again with different cases I've looked into. So yeah, with the zoomed in image, you can see there it looks exactly like, it looks like two dinner plates stuck together. There's this central rim around it as well. And you'll also note on the zoomed in image that we showed a moment ago, there's a bit of a white haze around it, which is odd, around the edges of the object. If you bring that back up a second, that's the other view of it. That's where I've added filtration to it. Yeah. So I over colorified it just to see what sort of colors came out on that. But it's got a weird white haze around it. So how did this all come about? This why drag up this case? It went on the sites and everything, and the photos in the case report and all the details are there. And it's been out there for a number of years. But what happened was recently somebody questioned the veracity of that photo and basically said it didn't look quite right. They were considering maybe it was a blended image, and I thought that at the time, especially because of the white border, and a lot of the time you can't really prove one way or the other. But I started to examine this a lot more closely. So they pointed out a particular UFO photograph that got taken back in 1963 in New Mexico. I think you should have that.
Is this
it's a
color by the tree?
Photo of the domed disc. That's right. Yes. So
I have to find it because I don't think it's titled. Is it? Is it? Sorry, I can only see the. I just need to find it up on here, and then I know what it's called.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so essentially, he pointed out that it looked quite similar in a way. The disc part of the object, and if you took off the dome off the top of this thing, it did actually look reminiscent. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. That is quite similar. So anyway, what I did is I shrunk it down and put it alongside the actual image and recolored it to the picture, and it became immediately obvious then that it wasn't. Okay, that's the photo. It's quite famous, so a lot of people may recognize that shot. Quite a good shot. Obviously, it's quite close.
Yeah.
So as you can see, the base of it, if you take the dome off the top, does look quite similar, quite reminiscent with this central rim. So I decided to have a look at that, and I shrunk it down and put it alongside the one, and you can see with a direct comparison that it's not it. That's not what the witness has done. Yeah. So I didn't believe, I fully believe that the witness anyway what he said, that it was genuine. But this was interesting, so I had to disprove that. So I believe there's enough differences in the two that it wasn't the same thing. It just implanted on there. So it's still valid at that point. There we go. Yeah. So you can see there's plenty of little differences between that. So it's reminiscent, but you can see the dark color of the central band, the way on the UFO image the top part, the lip overlaps, whereas on the actual one it underlaps. If you flip it upside down, obviously that ruins all the perspective and everything. So it's definitely not it. But it was interesting that he pointed that out. So then we started looking into the metadata behind the picture. So metadata is a lot of information that's stored behind any image that's taken on a photograph. And I knew about sort of basic metadata before this data existed, but I started to have a proper detailed look at that now. And for the last week, I've been delving into that quite a lot. I've been examining control images that I've been taking and receiving on different camera models on Android phones, iPhone, etc., and comparing the difference between original photos and ones that have been purposely modified. And the differences in the metadata are massive. They're a lot bigger than I expected them to be. You get all sorts of metadata that vanishes. You get other metadata that comes in. You get some of the values change on the data, even though it exists on both. And I believe, after doing detailed analysis of this and then examining the UFO photograph, that I'm 99.99% sure that it's not a modified photograph. I do not believe it's a modified image. It's fitting in with all original unedited images in terms of the order of the metadata, exactly what's showing up in there. And it is quite detailed, and I've been doing sort of extensive analysis. Now, I want to prove this 100%, but there is a way of editing metadata. This is the problem, you see, because there's certain ways you can edit metadata in photographs. So you could take a modified image and then try to edit it to get back to the original. Now, the problem with that is two problems with that. First of all, the amount of changes is massive. and you'd have to be really know your stuff to fix it fully. But secondly, there are some metadata that appears to be non-writable back to the original file. So some of the tags that are disappearing or appearing, you can't get it back to how it looked originally, nor can you resize it, because with the size, the pixel size, etc., changes when you put it inside a paint program. All of this points towards it not being a modified image. So then you have to look into other things. So could suggest, well, maybe it's a mundane object like a blimp or a balloon or something like that. Yeah. However, it wouldn't have vanished with it. So if you trust what the witness is saying, it wouldn't have vanished like that, because it's a nice still day. It would have still been there and slowly drifted away. He only looked away a second and it had just gone. So that can be discounted for that reason alone. They often, with the UFO photographs where people don't see a UFO at the time, but they see it on the photograph, it can be an insect or a dust or a leaf or something drifting past the camera, and then it just looks really strange and looks like a big object at a distance. Now, I've looked into that. So the coloration one that you put up there, blue colors are coming out, which could well be the sky reflecting in the body of the object. Certainly doesn't look like a leaf or debris or anything like that.
And he saw it. He's saying he saw it. He looked
saw
up
it for a minute. Yeah, absolutely. And also, there are all sorts of little telling signs. So you have to remember that testimonial evidence with these cases is just as important. Yeah, it's all part of a full picture. Yeah, you can't just look at a photograph and be like, I'm going to prove it or disprove it. It doesn't work like that. The photograph backs up the testimonial evidence. Now, there are aspects in the testimonial evidence that he provided, both with the original case report that he submitted to the group and further discussions over the phone with myself, that lead me to believe that he was telling the truth. Yeah, there was no sign that they were in it for any form of fame or fortune. He wasn't asking for money to sell the image to me or to a newspaper. He didn't want he didn't care about whether I put his names in there or not in the report. I don't think he even knew I was going to even write a report, to be fair. So there was no kind of warning signs going off, alarm bells. Yeah. There's other aspects that came out that I think are very, very significant. He said at the time that he couldn't see the central rim. So what you're seeing on the photograph, he said he couldn't see that with his naked eye. You know, he said he couldn't see that central line around the thing. Right. On the photograph, you can. Now you have to say, if he's faked the image, surely he would say that he'd seen exactly what the image shows. You'd say, yeah, I saw this, and there it is on the photograph. And so that there points away from it being that. And as I say, I've already proved pretty conclusively, I would say, that it's not modified. So
I mean, it's tiny as well, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to pull off a hoax, you maybe want to get something a little bit bigger and a bit more impressive. Yeah. This is looks like a tiny blim in the sky, doesn't it?
Exactly. Now you look at all this evidence back to back, and what I believe it currently points to, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I'm still looking into this. I'm not 100%. I want to get 100% with the metadata and what that shows, but what it's pointing towards at the moment is that is a genuine shot, and I also believe it's probably one of the most compelling shots that we've had in because of the analysis work that I've done on it. Also, then you have to say, okay, if it's not manipulated, what's the white haze going on around the object? Because if that's part of the actual thing. So in the reports, I said, well, potentially that's some kind of air distortion or energy coming off the object that's causing that. It's a definite kind of white blur around the edge of the thing. Now, if you say it's not manipulated, that's part of the image. That's actually around the object. Why? You have to ask these questions. So it's quite fascinating, and I'm still not at the end of that analysis yet, but it's quite interesting unearthing an old case and sort of finding additional evidence supporting its veracity. So
yeah, it's great. Do you find people who have sightings then have a visitation? Is that
sometimes? Yeah, there are people who experience contact are more likely to see UFOs. In some of the bigger repeater cases, where they're known as repeaters in the UFO community, people who regularly experience contact, and they may see 5, 6, 10 UFOs in their life. So,
what about the other way around, though? People who have a sighting first, are they then? Is it kind of like they know that they've seen it? You've seen it.
It can be that sighting was directly them checking them out, and there was direct interaction. And then other times what's interesting is when you come across contact cases where people have seen UFOs, but they've seen them right on the horizon. And you have to say, well, surely that's just got to be a coincidence. There doesn't appear to be that direct interaction going on that you'd expect. if they're seeing something that's direct over their head, and I've dealt with lots of cases like that. In actual fact, we're going to go over one sort of similar to that. But if they're seeing something up close, then it suggests that it's there for them for a direct interaction, maybe monitoring them in some way, maybe planning to come back and abduct them later on or whatever. But a lot of the time, it just seems to be that they're much further away, and it's almost like coincidence that they've seen them. It's a bit puzzling, that.
Just got a little question here come up. I might as well ask it. Well, Andy Gone Fishing, how you doing, Andy? Have you seen the Men in Black or experienced them?
Have I seen the Men in Black? I've dealt with a number of contactees who've had Men in Black aspects to their contact experiences. I haven't personally seen the Men in Black myself. However, there was one contact case that I dealt with that we had signs that we were being monitored. So it's my belief that most UFO groups are probably monitored behind the scenes just to see what information they're putting out and that sort of thing. And sometimes they may or may not want those case details going out to the public for whatever reason. A lot of the time you find that they try to cover up cases involving the military directly, or a case that sort of proves that the military are covering up UFOs or aspects of UFOs. And those cases they'll try to kind of put a head on. And I've known various people over the years who've got in trouble for going into those cases and trying to release data about them. Most of the cases I've released, there hasn't been any warning signs going off like that. There was one contact case I dealt with from up north England, and the gentleman involved, he'd been talking with me about his experiences, and he hadn't told anybody that he was working with me. And he went out to a market, and while he was at the market, somebody tapped him on the shoulder. And he turns around, and there's a gentleman in a suit, a brown suit, believe it or not, Men in Brown, taps him on the shoulder, and he turns around, and what they said to him was, you know that man you're talking to in Birmingham, how do you know you can really trust him? That's what it said to him. And then the man turns around, and he follows him and watches him get in a car and drive off. So it's like backwards psychology. So instead of sort of saying, you're not allowed to talk about it, it was the planet Venus or whatever, they reverse it. And they're trying to get him to not trust me. So he stops talking about his experience. Same end game, other way around. So that was quite interesting. And I had no reason to believe that he made that up. He contacted me pretty much as soon as it happened. He rang me up on the mobile phone and said, you're not going to believe what's just happened. There was no evidence to suggest that he'd made up that story. No reason to. So interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? So yeah, can I just go back to the the thing with the hybrids?
Sure.
How are they communicating with people? Is it through thought? Is it spoken? Do they know English? I mean,
so the beings involved in contact. There's numerous types, by the way, as well. Species, if you will. Maybe they're species, maybe they're types, whatever you want to call them. Maybe some are manufactured by other ones. There are certain specific types that come out again and again through cases, and I've dealt with a lot of cases where the individual will see either different types in different experiences, or sometimes multiple types in the one same experience. So what they're doing with the hybrids thing, the beings talk telepathically, as do the hybrids that they're creating, these infants. But yeah, they've got a vestigial. It appears to be a vestigial mouth. So they usually got a mouth, but it's usually just kind of like a thin slit. I'm talking about the greys now, the most widely reported type or species, with the usually big black eyes, sort of light grey skin color, very slender. But they so they've got a mouth, but sometimes it's barely noticeable at all, and it's just a thin slit. And they don't talk using it, although there've been some cases where they've done things like express emotion through it, like smiled at the person and that sort of thing. But the trouble is, because it's all telepathy and working on a sort of mind level, you don't know whether they've really smiled or whether they're just projecting that kind of thought into their heads. So people will hear them speak in their own language. So if you're French, you'll hear it talk French to you, so you understand it. And it doesn't always come through as direct words. It seems varied. Some people have sort of direct conversations with them and can actually think back questions, and they'll actually get responses from them. Other times it's more like a kind of feeling, like emotions that they're sharing. So they won't hear specific words, but they'll know what it means indirectly. So, and it's quite hard for contactees to actually explain what that is and explain what's going on with that. So, but I've heard that of lots of people to try, try.
I've lost your sound completely. It's gone. I don't know what's happened, but that sounds better.
Is that coming through now?
Yeah, that's it.
That's my headphones. They accidentally fall out, and when they fell out for some reason, it's interrupted the mic. Are we back?
Yeah? Yeah, that sounds great. There's a little bit of feedback, but
yeah, that's what I was trying to avoid. I can try plugging it back in. If you give me a second, I'll try something out a minute.
Yeah, no problem. I might put one of these sketches up. Let me find it.
Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I can hear you now. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, fantastic. We're back. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Where did we get to?
Do you want to talk about these sketches?
Yeah, that's the Glasgow case. Yeah. Yeah. So so we're going to get into another contact case here. This is quite relevant because we've been talking about aspects.
I think we're on track. Sorry, I think I kind of think we. Yeah, are you all right? Did we? Yeah, we are on track, aren't we, with stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So we were talking about the telepathy that they're being stored with.
That's it. Yeah. Sorry.
So, yeah, let's go into a specific case because I think your listeners will find this quite fascinating. So, a big contact case that I investigated last year is still ongoing in that the gentleman involved wants to be regressed, but then all of a sudden lockdown happens. So that's on hold at the moment. I work with a hypnotherapist here in Birmingham who assists me with cases involving contacts where we need that hypnosis aspect. And it's not always the right way forward, but sometimes people have questions that are left unanswered, and sometimes if they want to explore it, we can go down that route. Anyway, so the Glasgow case, it's a repeater case. It involves a gentleman grown up in Glasgow his whole life. He's had experiences from childhood up to quite recent, and the experiences are quite varied and fascinating. There's particular ones I'm going to go over, which I've sent you through some images relating to, and they start with his first main experience that involved contact. Before that point, he'd had a few sort of paranormal activity type, sort of that you'd usually put down to ghosts, glowing orbs of light, seeing that sort of thing. His first sort of main experience occurred in 1971 in the outskirts of Glasgow on a road called the Househill Muir Road, and he was there with his family, and it involves the abduction of him and his brother, and it's absolutely fascinating. Now, a lot of the details for this I actually got out of an original diary that he'd kept. So he wrote a diary of these odd things that were happening in his life for a period of time, for a number of years, and a number of the experiences he sent me this diary. So we've got actual written records of him years and years and years before he ever spoke with me or anything. Straight from him about what he was experiencing, which was invaluable, absolutely superb getting that.
Yeah.
But yeah, with this experience, basically his parents had gone out for the night to a show or whatever, and his cousin was babysitting him and his brother, and he was looking forward to a new TV program. The Untouchables, the gangster show, was just starting off on telly, and he was looking forward to seeing that. He'd been allowed to sort of stay up late. It wasn't late. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, and basically what happened was the program was starting late, and he was upset about it. He was going to miss it, and they were trying to force him to go up to bed. And at that moment, all of a sudden, the living room is flooded with bright white light. It's coming in from outside, and his cousin knows there's something really wrong about this, and she's like, "Don't look, don't go to the window." But Rob, the witness, he's absolutely fascinated, and he runs over and pulls back the blinds. And what he sees is quite dark outside because of the time of year. It was dark by that time, and the road outside. What he could see was a moving light, almost like a searchlight on the ground, coming down from above somewhere and hitting the road surface and moving along the road slowly. And then it went up one of the walls of one of the houses nearby. I was fascinated by what this was. So he runs back out, he runs past his older brother and runs outside. runs out the front door of the house and runs down to the bottom of the steps outside the house. So there he is in the front garden, and he looks around to the right, and further down the road, a few houses down, he can see a white glowing disc-shaped object. It's just over the roof of the house, several houses down from them. And the light coming out of this object is crazy. He said it just covered the whole area. All the surroundings were all sort of glowing. So he's there looking at that. His brother comes out and joins him.
Shall I put the image up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Okay, now, a lot of the time witness drawings, I get them to do them new. This one is an original. This was drawn by him in his teen years, in his early teens. That's the house I'm talking about in the distance there, with the disc over it. You can see he said it looked a bit like a cake with a slice cut out because of the edge of the roof and the angle he was looking at it. And that's him and his brother standing there. And you're probably wondering who this third chap is. So he's looking around at his brother, and he turns to his brother, and they're staring just in awe of what's going on. And apparently the light had just pulled all the colour out of the whole of the surroundings. He looks around at his brother, so there's, can you believe this? When he turns back round, he realises there's a figure standing to his right with his hand on his right shoulder, as you can see in the image.
Wow.
The figure's facing away from them, but it's wearing a kind of black shawl going right down to the ground. The figure's face appears to be a kind of light grey tinge, but he said because the colour was sucked out of everything, you couldn't really tell exactly what colour it was, but didn't look right. Completely bold. Essentially, it was a grey, just facing away from them. That was proved in a later experience, which we'll get to. So that's the grey, and he was also staring towards this disc like them. And they're just looking down, they're all three staring at it, and then bang, it goes and it changes. The scene completely and utterly changes.
Wow.
And what it changes to is he's standing there with his brother, exactly in the same position they were in a moment ago, and they're surrounded in a glowing pink bubble of energy of something all around them. They can see it all around them. But as they look, it starts to kind of dissipate, to sort of dissolve and sort of break apart. And as it breaks apart, you can see daylight through it. And he's like, what's going on here? And it breaks apart more and more and more. And he realizes he's no longer standing in his garden. He's in fact standing halfway down a side road. I think I sent you a photograph of this as a side path, just along from his house. And this is where they reappeared.
Yeah, hang on.
I think it says House O'Meal Road side path or something like that. Should be next to the other. There's two photographs of House O'Meal.
Yeah, it doesn't say side path, but I think it's this one. I'm just guessing.
No, that's from the other. That's from the other case. It's okay.
Okay,
we'll get
sorry.
to it. That's all right. Yeah, if you just put up House O'Meal Road, I'll explain. You can see it on that one anyway. Any of the ones that say House O'Meal Road on them should be fine.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, that's the side path. Okay, so. Rob's house was off to the right, several houses. This is the side path that leads through to another road. The house on the left there, the image, is the house that the disc was hovering just behind, around where those trees are now. And down there, about halfway down, you can just about make it out. About halfway down the path on the right, there's a sort of power box, electrical box. And him and his brother were basically standing near to that. To their right was a small child playing with a toy down on the ground, just staring at them, like staring open-mouthed at them.
Right.
We got no idea what that kid saw. Maybe he saw them appear out of thin air or what. But all he knew, he was deeply confused. He was in exactly the same position he'd been a second before, but it was now daylight, and he didn't know what was going on. He's no longer in his garden. His brother's there next to him. So then a lady leans out of the house opposite them, the one that had the disc behind, and she leans out this window and she says, "Oh, yeah, are you the two kids that have been missing all night?" Okay, so he knew from what she'd said that it was now morning time, and that also people had been looking for them. So obviously the parents had come back from wherever they'd been, found them gone or whatever. He doesn't know what happened with the cousin or what she told them or didn't tell them. We don't know. I'll tell you what we don't know in a minute. But so basically, he decides to rush back to the house. So he runs down the side path, goes back round, and as he runs towards his house, back to where he was, where he'd first been standing, he realizes that the memories of the experience are literally vanishing from his mind. Now this is fascinating. Now a lot of the time with missing time, it happens directly, involuntarily. With this, he actually could sense that he was forgetting as he ran.
Wow.
He realized the memories were missing from his mind. The last thing he remembered from that experience was just reaching his garden gate, and it's gone, and it was gone from his mind. And I've dealt with other cases like this, and it's hard to believe. The same thing had happened to his brother as well. Yeah, so for both of them, the memories drained and went from their heads completely. So they carried on living their life without realizing that that incident had ever occurred. So you're probably wondering, how do we have all the details of this? How did he write it down in his diary if he couldn't remember it? Well, there was some sign that his parents knew that something had gone on with this, and maybe it was linked with UFOs or contacts. Because he said in the years following it, his dad used to go out fishing with him, and quite often his dad would bring up the subject of UFOs and ask him what he thought about them and stuff like that. It was almost like his dad was trying to see if he'd recollect what had taken place. But he never said specifically, his dad never said specifically that time where you and your brother vanished, what happened with that or anything like that. Didn't go into it directly. And they also moved address soon after that. Now, you know, he's just speculating, but he thinks maybe they moved address because of what had happened. You know, they were frightened because of what happened on that night and they moved. Anyway, so years later, we go now forward to our next thing, which is the incident on Vanguard Road. So it's now 1986 or 87. And he's gone round to see a friend's house. He's gone round to his friend's house, and they're just playing out in the garden. They're playing with a frisbee. There's him, his friend's younger sister, and also the mother is just sitting on the steps. And again, it's a lovely, lovely day. It's middle of the afternoon, bright blue sunshine. There's Vanguard Street. Yeah. So you can see these houses have these tall steps going up to them. The front doors are a height off the gardens.
Yeah.
So they're just out there, and it's a lovely bright day, not like in the photo there. And he's thrown this frisbee, and his friend throws the frisbee, and he thinks that he's just thrown the frisbee right at his head. So he ducks out of the way instinctively, but he hasn't yet. And he gets back up and he realizes his friend hasn't done that. And what's hovering in the sky, sort of a few hundred meters away from them, he reckons, is this white disc. This is really interesting. It appeared to have these weird scorch marks on the top, and he's drawn a color picture of that, which you can put up. But yeah, it was like a white, slightly glowing, not massively glowing, but it's daylight, of course. So probably a lot of the glow you couldn't really see with that. But he said over the top of it, there was these weird scorch marks, like these lines, but it was just hovering there like this domed disc-shaped object. And they were just fascinated by it. They were just looking at this. And they watched it for a couple of minutes. It was moving slowly. It was moving about 35 miles an hour and heading in a southwesterly direction. So slowly moving away from them. And they lost sight of it around behind the houses. So then he runs inside the house, and they run upstairs to the bedroom window and look out the bedroom window so they can continue watching it. And you can see from the amount of details that he's giving here, and this is written in his diary as well, don't forget. But you can see from the amount of details that he was reliving real things that happened to him. You know, there's all these little signs come out that he's talking about a real incident here. So they lost sight of it, and he runs upstairs so they can carry on watching it. And they watch it slowly move away into the distance, and it reaches the River Clyde. As it reaches the river, it seems to do a right angle turn, and then it starts following the river. So it changes its course and starts following the path of the river, staying at around the same height. At that point, they lose sight of it, so it's gone away into the distance. So they run back downstairs to talk about what they'd just seen with the mother. And you remember that his friend was kind of dismissive of it and said, "Oh, that's a really weird, like remote controlled toy." And it was like that. He said, "Oh, you're mad. That was clearly no remote controlled toy." And it was a big thing for a start. He reckons it was about at least 7 meters across. Wow. So they're discussing this, and a couple of minutes later, there's a loud roaring noise. And two Harrier jump jets, or what he believes was Harrier jump jets or similar, flew over the house at low altitude and headed off in the same direction the UFO had headed in. And it appears that there was some kind of military interception of the object.
Wow.
He doesn't know where those jets came from, but it stands to reason, especially as they were heading in the same direction, that they were heading towards it. You put two and two together, So quite interesting, that one. Now, that incident jogged his memory. It jogged his memory back to the previous thing that happened in 1971. So what happens with this is when people have these missing time, sometimes a trigger can occur which allows them to, and the memories come back.
Yeah.
And I remember, so he saw the white disc, and that reminded him of the white disc he'd seen back in 1971. And then the details come flooding back. They didn't come flooding back instantly. It wasn't like the whole experience came back in one go. He said in the days following it, bits and pieces started to come back. You know, had a couple of dreams about it and that sort of thing. And before long, he had the whole picture of what had happened, but he still couldn't remember what had happened between seeing the being and staring towards the disc and appearing inside this bubble of energy. Very likely that they were taken aboard the craft and abducted. We reckon they were abducted for 13 hours because that was the time difference. So we don't.
Do you think that information will come through at some point?
Maybe if he comes to Birmingham once all this is over and done with, the regression hypnotherapist is starting to work again, he may come down from Scotland and we'll get him regressed. He's in his late 50s now. Right.
Or he could have a download, could he, at any time? I mean,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So the downloads thing occurs from time to time. There's one case I dealt with actually. It's absolutely fascinating. Involved automatic writing, and it was a boy from Dudley, and he'd had an experience, a visitation by these beings in the night. 3 of them just woke up, and there were 3 of them alongside the bed. In the days following that experience, he wrote out 22 pages of script. Now I wasn't going to go over this one, so I haven't got the images to show you, but they're on the BUFOG website. All the case reports that I talk about here, they're all on the BUFOG website, and you can just search for Dudley in the search and it will come up. But yeah, he drew 22 A4 pages of what appears to be an alien language, a weird script that are not Earth language of any kind. They are repeated, though. They're repeated letters. You can see the same symbols again and again and again. It's very, very detailed. It's quite fascinating. And he drew about 20, I think it was 23 and a half pages. And then it stopped about halfway down. And I said to him, well, why did you stop halfway down? And he said that was it. He said that was the end of whatever this thing was. And he didn't know what it was. He doesn't know what it means, why he was given it or anything, but it's it is what it is. So yeah, quite fascinating. Some of the things that come out through these cases. And he had no interest in UFOs. In actual fact, when I went back to speak with him to see if I could continue working on the case, he just said, it just happened, I just want to get on with my life. So a lot of people, even though they've had an incredible experience like that happen, it hasn't suddenly given them this massive interest in the UFO subject.
No.
Or a massive fear of it either. So some people get a massive fear of it, obviously, after they have experiences. They're very scared of looking at pictures of greys or whatever. But he just had just impartial to it. It was just like, yeah, I just want to carry on with my life, really. So, which is quite interesting, and again brings home the kind of reality of what he'd experienced there. It didn't change his life. It didn't turn him into a lecturer where he went round everywhere telling everybody about how he wrote an alien language. Just happened.
Yeah. How does religion come into this? People who are, say, religious and having these experiences, does that kind of mess with them?
It depends on the religion. Some religions are fine with the idea of other planets having other beings on, if they're indeed from other planets. We're getting into the origins of them now, but other people, if they believe in that only the Earth can have sort of advanced life forms on, they may sometimes sort of see them as demonic, and that tends to occur more, I'd say, in the States. There's some cases where people have kind of attributed them to demons, that sort of thing, and put a sort of religious slant on it. Now, the opposite of that, angels, this is an interesting one. So one of the types of beings that are seen quite commonly are what's known, we call them the Nordics. They essentially look very, very human-like, which is interesting in itself. And they've got sort of a long, sort of blondish hair, usually, or pale-coloured hair. They wear jumpsuits, usually kind of blue or silver colour. Some people kind of feel that they look kind of quite 60s or sort of 70s, and but they're still seen quite regularly in contact cases, sometimes working alongside other species like the greys. Now, with these beings, they look quite sort of beautiful, sort of chiseled appearance, and people who've got a religious background can sometimes interpret them as angels. I dealt with a contact case from France, from Saint Nazaire in France, and the lady actually came across to the UK to be regressed, and for me to have a sort of direct investigation with her, which was nice for her to make the trip, and she was Catholic upbringing and everything, and she'd had these experiences with these Nordics. And she said, when we first started talking about her experiences and asked her to go into the weird things that have been happening, I never sort of say aliens. I told you about the aliens you saw. No. I don't try to lead people. I just try to see what people say to me and interpret it, without any form of me trying to push any particular viewpoints onto them, at least in the early stages of it. But once she told me about that, she said, I had this weird dream. There were angels standing around me. They had this long blonde hair. They were wearing like blue suits. But here's the weird thing: they weren't wearing any crucifixes, and they didn't have wings on the back either.
Right.
And I said, and I brought up some images of Nordics out of other cases. And I said, did they look anything like this? And she's like, yeah, that's them. I said, yeah, you're not the only one who's seen these things. No, I'm not saying they're not angels. Maybe maybe an interpretation of angels. Maybe they are. And that goes back to the idea that some of the passages in the Bible and things are actually talking about UFO sightings. And they interpreted them back then as a sort of vision from God or angels coming down from the sky. You can see the similarities with some of the things.
Yeah, you sometimes hear about people say maybe they're in the bed and suddenly they see this black form or aliens, and they'll shout, go away in God's name or Jesus, and this thing goes away. But I've also listened to a guy who was saying that actually that's the end of the experience. It's when you're telling them to go away, they actually are leaving.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. He's a fascinating American guy, David. He's done a lot of work with contactees. I'll remember it and I'll bring it up. But
I mean, they will do that. They'll come and they'll go. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can shout at them and they'll stop. Other times they won't. It can often lead to sort of lasting trauma. And it's very, very controversial. A lot of people don't like it because they're like, well, if these beings are intelligent, if they can understand us and speak with us, then what gives them, why are they not asking for consent? Now, this is trying to humanize something that isn't human. We don't really know the full reason for what they're doing here. Some contactees have tried talking with them and asked them. A lot of the time they're quite cryptic, but sometimes they will say things, and a number of contactees have had them say stuff like it's our right to do this and that sort of thing. So you can read into that however you wish. Some people may go as far as saying that we've been created by them and we are some kind of pet project for them.
Right.
Which, maybe they view us in the same way that we view animals that we're looking at in a lab. So.
Let me just bring a question up, guys. Anyone who's put some question up before, they've gone now from the screen. If you don't mind rewriting them, sorry, but I'll start because this is the last one I can see. It's Andy Gone Fishing again. What is the common description of so-called ETs you encounter?
Okay. So the most common type, which we've been talking about a number of times, we call them the greys. That's not their actual name. That's just what we call them. Most of the time, they've got kind of pale or sort of light grey coloured skin, sometimes kind of more tan sort of colours. They're usually kind of child height, about sort of 4 foot high, but sometimes they can be quite tall. Sometimes you can get different sort of subtypes of them. So you can get ones that are like 8 or 9 foot high. And that was actually in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the famous film with Steven Spielberg. He actually showed that because Steven based that movie on contact, on the contact subject. And at the end of the film, where the big UFO opens and all the beings come out, if you remember, there were loads and loads of little guys, and then there's one big one standing in the middle of them. So that was directly based on that from details he'd had from real contact cases. So that's the most common type. Then I've mentioned the Nordics as well. Very, very human. Really, really interesting. The fact that they look just like us. Why is that? Are we directly related to them in some way? Have they created us? Are we them? There's lots of different explanations that they could possibly be. Some people have been told certain things, but then how do we know that when they're told those things that the beings themselves aren't giving them a story? I wouldn't put anything at the question. Then you've got the reptilians are seen from time to time with cases. Now, many people have heard of them, and they're often considered quite sort of malevolent or evil. But then that's the same way as saying that the human race is evil or the human race is good. You can't do it. There's a whole spectrum.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, why would
there's
the
good
same
and bad everywhere, isn't there?
Yeah. So I've dealt with contact cases involving reptilians. I've dealt with cases involving both reptilians and greys working together. Quite often they're very, very frightening for people, and maybe because of their actual appearance, they kind of almost look like sort of half lizard men, for want of a better word. Sort of quite muscular, proper sort of lizard-like snout. Sometimes they've got a tail, sometimes not. Usually covered in sort of dark green or dark brown scales. And yeah, some people believe that they are taking over our governments or trying to rule the world behind the scenes, and there's kind of links there with the Illuminati, New World Order, etc. I'd say
another pill to take, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's all sorts of aspects to the subject, and you can go down all these different paths with it. Anyway, so then you've got the other species which are reported time to time are mantids. Now they're quite rare. They only show up in sort of about less than 5% of the cases I've investigated. They kind of look a bit like greys, but they're a lot more sort of insectoid in appearance. They usually got massive eyes around the side of the head, remind people of a praying mantis insect. And in some cases, people will actually describe them as that, and they'll say, I had this weird experience where I was talking with this 8-foot high grasshopper, things like that. So they won't even describe it as an alien. They'll be like, why am I talking to a giant bug? And it's only after, it's the same as the angels thing with the Nordics, they're interpreting it as something else. It's only when I show them pictures of mantids that people are drawing. We call them mantids because they look a bit like praying mantis insects. I don't believe that they're evolved praying mantises or anything like that. Just want to put that out there. There's just reminiscent. All life forms are going to be reminiscent. If you think about the vast amount of life on our planet and the vast amount of shapes and sizes, colors, and everything that it encapsulates, then any life form is going to be reminiscent of something on Earth. It would be very hard for it not to resemble something. So those are the main types. There are other types that occur very occasionally. There's a few cases dealt with very, very short things. They're sometimes called blue dwarfs, got blue colored skin sometimes, and they're very, very, very short. They're about sort of 1 foot, 1.5 foot high, creepy little things. And they're sometimes seen sort of assisting greys with abductions or cases. One of the big cases, the Whitley Strieber case from America, they made the film Communion on that. That showed the blue dwarfs because they were part of his experiences involved them as well as the greys. And then there's also feline type beings that look almost kind of like cat-like in their appearance. There are a number of other types which are come out through specific individual cases. And then you've also got your links with the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena. And some people have had UFO sightings where they've seen kind of hairy, tall, humanoid creatures. So, is that a direct link there, maybe?
Well, I cover a lot of, Bigfoot encounters and stuff like that. We've interviewed a lot of people and hear a lot of stories. And there's quite a lot that say there's been, when they've seen Sasquatch, they've seen orbs, they've seen lights and UFOs. So
weird crossover.
Yeah.
You get the same with ghosts as well. I mean, the amount of contact cases I've dealt with where the contactee is also experiencing what we would usually attribute to, say, poltergeist activity. I'd say at about 85% of the cases I've dealt with. I did some measures a while back, so that actually is about right. They'll have one or more experiences of kind of glowing orbs floating around their house, or moving objects, apparitions like shadowy forms. It's just really interesting, all these parallels and all these crossovers between different areas of the paranormal. Are we looking at one big thing and it's different parts of the puzzle? We're interpreting
the paranormal's the umbrella, isn't it?
Yeah.
The paranormal's umbrella. Got another question here. Nobody knows, 808. Dave, do you think greys are humans from the future? We become dependent on tech and will look like them if you go by what we know from evolution.
Yeah, very good question, actually. I went to the Leicester Space Centre a while back, and they had a planetarium show which happened to be on alien life. It was quite interesting, so of course I went to see it because of what I do. And they got together a bunch of top-level scientists to predict what they think an advanced alien life form could potentially look like, and inadvertently, without any mention of the UFO subject, had gone and created something that looked a bit like a grey. It had large eyes that would allow it to survive better and see. It had a sort of large cranium because of the larger telepathic powers or using mind powers. It was quite slender in form. It had 2 arms, 2 legs like human. So that was interesting. Do I think that greys are us from the future? There's some case evidence that actually directly supports that. There's some cases where people have literally been told that they are or that they've been sent back, like there's something that future humans have created and sent back in time to gather DNA for whatever reason or other things. My personal view on this, from all the cases I've looked into, if I had to choose one view, and it might be multiple things going on here, I don't dismiss that either, but my personal view is that they are extraterrestrial. I believe that they're from elsewhere in our universe. They may have come here a long time ago and be living here for thousands of years alongside us, but I believe their origin is from out there. I believe that they also possess very advanced capabilities, some may say multidimensional capabilities. There are lots of aspects of the contact subject that point towards that. A lot of the time when the beings appear, they won't just walk into the person's room through the door. They will sometimes, yeah, but in some cases, there's a kind of white glowing portal of some kind will open, and they'll actually step out of the light, out of a solid wall, out of a solid ceiling, and take the person into it. And they pass through that, and then they're elsewhere. So there's all sorts of elements like that, very, very advanced capabilities. And also what we see, the observations with their craft as well. So the UFOs that people see. And when I say UFOs, I know that stands for unidentified flying objects. Yes, I'm not talking about the 95% of cases that are mundane objects yet. So most UFO cases are mundane objects that are misidentified. Yeah, there's a lot out there that people aren't familiar with seeing. I know that Chinese lanterns are now taking the back step because they're a fire hazard. So there's a lot less of those, which is a good thing, because I used to get so many cases of Chinese lanterns come in. But there's still things like solar airships. Most people won't know what a solar airship is. A solar airship is about 10 meters long, and it's a massive, long black cylinder. It's a massive black balloon, and you get it on a hot, sunny day, put it down on the grass. The air inside it warms up, and the thing lifts up into the sky. I've had people come to me and say that they've seen a cylindrical-shaped UFO with rainbow-coloured flashing lights down it. And when I've seen the photographs or videos that they've taken, it's a solar airship with the sunlight reflecting off it and creating beams of light. So you always have to be careful. There's all sorts of stuff out there.
Yeah.
However, there's still a 5% of unknowns, which is a hell of a lot of cases, yeah, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of cases here. There's a lot of cases that I've dealt with where it's quite obviously none of those things, where it's something up close. It's quite clearly a structured craft of some kind. You get the same types of craft will occur again and again and again. I know I've gone off from the question a bit. I hope that answered the question well enough. Do I believe they're from our future? I believe they're probably from off-world, but I wouldn't put it out of the question. Never put it out of the question, because it's not set in stone.
Yeah.
Anybody who says it is set in stone is wrong and incorrect.
Is there anyone in the UK using monocular vision, night sky watching for aircrafts that you know of?
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, I know these. I mean, I don't know a lot about them, but they're basically, binoculars. I think they're called that. We can't see with our things. They can pick up things that we can't see.
You talk about infrared, yeah?
I don't know if they are infrared. Right. Monocular vision cameras. I don't know. If anybody knows, okay. Brandon, do you know?
I've heard of IR cameras. I mean, you can get IR night vision cameras that will, detect
this
things that are outside the visual spectrum.
A guy I follow, UFOs over Vegas, and he's using monocular vision and seeing stuff that you can't see with the human eye. I guess there must be.
Oh yeah. So these, I mean, if you think about it, these craft they're up there. Yeah, they're up there. Now we've seen case after case after case where they appear or vanish out of thin air. Yeah. So it'll be a clear sky. They won't be hidden behind a cloud or anything like that. They'll literally see them pop into or out of existence. And you have to say, where are they going? Are they really gone, or are they just cloaked in some way outside of the visual spectrum? Now, in some ways, these cameras might be able to pick those up in certain cases. Now, just as people say, well, why not remain invisible all the time? But again, we're trying to humanize something. Why, if they're working covertly, why are they all covered in flashing lights? Well, first of all, they're not. Only some of them are. A lot of them aren't covered in any lights yet. There's a big variety, but look at the vehicles that we use here on Earth. Look at the variety that we've got in our car shapes and sizes, even alone, before you get into boats and aircraft and other things. all sorts of shapes and sizes. So
Yeah.
why would the same logic not apply to another species?
Yeah.
Vehicles?
I've got another question. Sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Kathleen Sprague.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen a UFO yourself?
I have indeed, yeah. I finally had a definitive unidentified flying object sighting in the summer of 2009. Believe it or not, it actually took place. I'm not making this up. It took place on a UFO Skywatch in Warminster, which is a known UFO hotspot. Right, I can't argue with that. It happened. Basically, there was a paranormal conference on down in Warminster. Warminster had a massive kind of UFO flat back in the late 70s to mid 80s. Lots and lots of people. It went out in the papers. And ever since, people have seen fascinating things there. And I've spoken with people who've had very genuine, really unusual sightings in the area. So in 2009, I went down there for this conference, and they decided to put a Skywatch on halfway through the conference between the 2 days. So I was well up for that. So there was me and about 50 other people up there on the top of the hill. It was a place called Cradle Hill, just north of Warminster. It's widely known as a good place for sky watching. You get clear views of the sky. There's a number of hills around the outskirts of Warminster that are good for this. So we're on Cradle Hill, and it got to about 11:30 at night. Now, there was TV cameras up there towards the start of the watch, but by this time, a lot of the people had turned out and gone back to their hotels. There was about 20 of us left, I'd say, up on the hill at that point. It was about 11:30, and it's quite dark, but it was a lovely starry night sky. It was really, really lovely, perfect weather for Skywatch, quite clear. And Cradle Hill is actually right next to some MOD-owned land. There's a military reserve right there next to it. So you see something in the air, you immediately think of some military craft, military aircraft. So somebody all of a sudden shouts, "Oh, there's a jet coming in." So we look to our right, and sure enough, there's a white light in the distance coming in towards our direction across Warminster town. And as it gets nearer, all of a sudden, this white light just flares up really, really bright. It's like, boom, it just goes up like that. Everybody says, "Oh, it's a bit odd." It stays lit for about 2 seconds. So not like a strobe. You know the way a strobe on a plane would go on off? It wasn't like that. It stayed lit. And then it dies back down. And then it went back down to a small white light. As it gets nearer, there was also a small dark turquoisey coloured light on it, like a dark bluey green colour. I've never, ever, ever seen one plane with that colour light on ever. It's always lime green here. When you see green lights on the plane, it's a bright lime green colour. This was kind of more dark turquoise colour. Anyway, it was down behind it, and you couldn't really see the shape or apparent size of the thing because it was up there in the dark sky, and it's our location with no lights anywhere nearby. So it was very hard to gauge exactly what we were looking at. We had night vision camera, but it didn't really pick up too much, unfortunately. As the object came in, all of a sudden, this white light flares up again. Bang! Every few seconds, it's going up and then back down. And it gets nearer, and we realise there's no sound coming from the thing. Now, all night we could hear planes in the distance because sound travels really well after dark. So you could hear planes right on the horizon. This thing was silent, and it was moving fast, and it was big. It was moving. It was coming in like the height of a low aircraft, several hundred feet over our heads. And if it was making any sound at that height, we would have heard it. There was nothing from it. And it came in, and it flew over our heads. And then it started to arc away from us, kind of turned on a sort of slow arc. It wasn't a direct turn. And then it just vanished into the distance. Every few seconds, you could still see this white light. Even after we'd lost sight of it in the distance, you could still see the white glow every few seconds. No idea what it was. So all the people up there, I investigated. The case report on this is on the website. If you type in Warminster, it'll come up on the search. And I investigated, got some interviews with some of the other people that were up there. Nobody could identify it. My friend who served in Iraq, so he knows his military aircraft. He knows both helicopters, drones, planes. He said the lighting configuration on that thing did not match any known military aircraft of any kind. And to this day, it's unidentified. It's flying, and it was definitely an object. So I can't say whether it was an alien. I can't say whether it had aliens aboard or humans or was remote controlled or what.
But it was a UFO.
It was a UFO, yeah. It could have been a clever hoax because they knew the Skywatch was going on that night, so they probably publicised that in the town. So maybe it was a clever hoax, but it was a big thing. And how do you fly that size completely silently? I don't know.
Yeah,
so
very
interesting case, yeah. It was good to finally see something that I couldn't explain.
Yeah. We've got another one here from
Yep.
Wonder Woman. Any accounts of rescuing angels?
Not specifically to my knowledge. I mean, rescuing angels, it depends what they mean by that. Can you ask them to elaborate a second?
Can you elaborate a little bit, please? I'll find another question.
I'm interested to hear what they're. I want
Yeah.
to make sure that I know what they're talking about before we carry on with that one.
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Have you had anyone with a close encounter of a fourth kind?
Close encounters of a fourth kind is abduction. We've been talking about that for.
So, what's the next one? Fifth kind? What's the fifth kind?
Fifth kind is past an abduction is direct communication, so to a deep level of direct communication.
Right. Okay.
Usually involving a thought. People try close encounters of the fifth kind C5 protocols on skywatches where they'll meditate and try to communicate directly and try to get craft or beings to come on in.
Okay.
There has been certain incidents where things have happened with that. I wouldn't
Is there a sixth kind?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that'll be the next stage, is it?
Yeah. But the fourth kind is abduction or contact.
Right. Okay. Got you. Thank you.
I'd like to say contact with that because not all contact cases involve abductions.
Yeah. Wonder Woman, I'm waiting for you to elaborate. Here's one. Hi, Cookie. Does Dave think they could have bases here, i.e. under the sea?
Very much so. Very much so. The deep ocean would be the ideal and logical place to hide if they were going to set up bases like that. There are numerous cases on record where UFOs have been seen moving around underneath the surface of the sea by fishermen off boats. There are some quite dramatic cases that have occurred in the past, and indeed recently, the USS Nimitz incident, which is linked with the gun camera footage, one of the 3 pieces of footage that's recently gone live into the public and was recently confirmed by the Pentagon. Some say it's a bit of a conspiracy why they would announce it now, and maybe it's to kind of throw off what's going on with the virus around the world. But either way, part of that incident involved a white tic-tac shaped object that was down near the surface of the sea, and there was also apparently a lot of disturbance, like in an area on the water. It looked like something big underneath the surface. They couldn't see it, but they could see disturbance going on, that there was something there under the water. If there are bases, that would be the logical place to put them on Earth, because there are areas of the sea, the deep sea, that we can't explore, that are too deep for us to go. Other places could be underground or off-world, maybe on the moon. There's some evidence that supports the idea of potential lunar bases. So it's quite fascinating, really. Yeah, you have to say, if they're here and they're here for a long time, it stands to reason that the bases like that would probably exist. And there is, of course, cases where people have come out with incredible claims about, finding sort of vast underground bases. There's a lot of conspiracies around Dulce, etc., the Dulce base, and what was or wasn't going on there. A lot of these things, you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very careful, because there's a lot out there on the internet, and with incredible claims like that, I want it backed up with incredible amounts of evidence, and a lot of the time you don't have that. And that's not the witness's fault. Yeah. So I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of cases. Yeah. And people often say to me, well, if this is all going on, how come we haven't got loads of photographs, of close-up photographs of UFOs all the time? Why aren't people taking photographs of the beings when they're being abducted, etc., etc.? There are lots of reasons why we're still not getting many good, clear photographs here. The objects are working covertly, so a lot of the time they're only seen at a great distance. A lot of the time they're seen after dark rather than daylight, so you won't see anything other than a silhouette or lights. Even modern smartphones, photographing something at a dark sky, it doesn't come out very well. It might come out like a white point of light. You might not see anything at all. That's the UFO we saw back in 2009. Even on a decent night vision camera, all it picked up was a white dot that was vanishing and appearing. Yeah. And me saying, "Tell me that's a jet." Someone.
Look, I saw a fox on the field behind me the other day in broad daylight. It happened for about 15 seconds, maybe less, I wanted to get my camera out, and I was thinking about it. My hand was going to the pocket, but I'm still looking at it, and it went before. And you know, that was just a nice fox. I don't know how people are expected to get the camera out when they're seeing something that they don't know what that is. You know, you can be taken over by the moment, and you know, we don't always get that picture, do we?
No, not at all.
I mean,
in a lot of cases,
by an alien, I'm not going to get my phone out.
Well, there's a particular reason why specifically in contact cases that doesn't happen, and the reason is that most people, when they experience contact and have direct visitation, like they're in an altered state of mind. Yeah, they'll usually act in a far more complacent manner to what's happening around them. They won't question what's happening to them. They'll just sit and observe. So they won't think, oh, I must get a photo or video of this. They'll just accept it as the norm, and then afterwards, when they think back to it, they'll be like, why did I act like that? That occurs again and again and again with cases. Wow. And it can also occur with UFO sightings, of course. People are also, you know, just in the moment, they're observing it. They're not thinking, oh, I must capture evidence of this to prove the existence of this. They're just experiencing. They're just like, wow, this is wild. And they're just staring at the object. Other times they move too fast, so they don't have enough time, because these things will often not hang around. You know, it's only a small percentage of sightings last for sort of a minute or more. And then in other cases, like the Abergavenny photo, didn't have his camera on him at the time. He was out in the garden. He wasn't expecting to see a UFO up in the sky. He had to run into the house to get his camera, and luckily the thing was still there when he came back out. Otherwise, we'd have no photos of it. So in over 95% of the cases I investigate, there is no photographic or video evidence. And through speaking with those people and understanding that they're being honest about what they're seeing and they're talking about real things that have occurred to them, it's totally not suspicious that they haven't got a photo or video.
No.
And there are some photos out there and videos that are good and are up close, and then people are just putting down the CGI and say, so it's lost in this sea of fake imagery that's out there. I'm hoping that my metadata analysis can prove either way, at least on photographs. So that's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. Wonder Woman came back. I think what she's trying to say is anyone who's been abducted, say, has anything come to rescue that person that they've remembered that have saved them, or maybe they felt like they've been rescued whilst having an experience or encounter.
I've heard of cases like that. I haven't. None of the cases I've directly investigated has that directly happened. There are some people who practice meditation and have spoke with their sort of spirit guides about their experiences and that sort of thing. I mean, there are some people who've actually had contact experiences through meditation. I don't practice meditation, but I can't dismiss the fact that numerous people have had interactions, you know, while meditating. And I wouldn't put it out of the question, nor would I say that definitely meant it was just in their mind at all. You know, I'd say that would be throwing the baby out with the bath. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, in terms of rescuing, no. I mean, some of the beings are quite positive in nature, especially the Nordics. A lot of the people, when they have experiences in Nordics, they're not frightened. They almost view them like an extended family, like a sort of long lost brother. And actually, that reminds me. Actually, there's something interesting here that I think your viewers will be interested in. There's a case I investigated a good while back from Buxton. Again, you can find the case report on the site. It involved hybrids, involved a hybrid baby, like I talked about earlier on. It also involved a landing of a UFO and two girls who were 14 years old at the time going aboard, willingly walking aboard it. So it wasn't really a direct abduction. They were kind of in a way invited by this craft that landed in front of them in broad daylight. And in that experience, she met a number of Nordics, and it was quite a positive experience for her. You know, she wasn't scared by them or anything, and they were having a communication. She, as a lot of the time of these cases, she couldn't really remember exactly what words were said. She just know that there was some kind of communication, and she sensed kind of that they were peaceful and friendly, and she wasn't frightened by them. And at the end of the conversation, she said to them, "Will I ever see you again?" And they said, "You will, but only when you die." That's what they said to her. Right. So that's very interesting indeed, and tends to suggest that there's kind of some link with them and like the afterlife in a certain way or something. And it's not the only link I've ever had in cases. I dealt with a number of years ago. I heard a story by somebody who'd had a near-death experience. So they had a car accident, and they had the tunnel of light. And he said that waiting for him in the tunnel of light were the silhouettes of 3 short beings with oversized heads. So there was a link there between the greys and death in some way. Fascinating.
No.
Who knows what
It's,
that leads to.
it's just so fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, that's why when I started investigating this, I knew this was going to be a lifetime thing for me. I mean, I've got a grey all over my back. I've got a back tattoo of a grey right down my back.
Right.
It's part of me. The UFO thing is a part of me. The investigation side of things. There's so few people actively investigating to a deep level that I almost feel like it's my duty now, and I've helped so many people over the years come to terms with what's happening to them. Not pushing my ideas onto them or anything, just allowing them to accept and get past the kind of fear elements of it. And I've had so many people over the years who come to me and thank me from the bottom of their heart for not treating them like a nutter and believing them and helping them through this.
Yeah.
And when you get that from people, you realise how that this really is going on, and it really is And when you realise it's a real thing, when that goes there, and you're like, wow, this is actually real, then it can't be nothing but continuously fascinating, because the idea that we are being visited or interacted with by other advanced beings, non-human creatures, has massive ramifications for the future of humankind and everything, and all sorts of different ways. And it's just incredible. And the evidence that I've looked into over the years, for me, is very, very significant. I would say certainly points towards that. And I would say to anybody out there who doubts the validity of this subject, who kind of brushes it off, start digging, start looking into some of the good cases.
Yeah.
And you'll see the evidence is there. It's right there. It's available for everybody. They just need to go look into it.
I've spoke to Paul Sinclair a couple of times, and his encounters are just incredible. What he went through as a young kid as well, and I'm glad you're out there, Dave, doing it, because, like you say, there's nowhere for people to go. These are just crazy, encounters that you can't put in any box, any normal box, to deal with, and. Like you say, once you start, I've done the same with the Bigfoot thing, that you realize people are getting touched by these things, internally, mentally, and it can eat away at people, these experiences that just don't have answers. And it's a good job there's people out there like yourself that will just listen to people, because sometimes that's all they need to do is to share that with someone and not feel alone.
I mean, not all the cases I investigate get turned into case reports, so I'm not like a journalist who'll just go and grab information out there against people's will. Every single time I write a case report, it's always with the express permission of the individual. If they want me to leave out their name, I'll leave out their name. If they want me to leave out their location, I'll leave that out. It's all down to them. If there's entire experiences they've had that they're embarrassed to talk about and they don't want going out in the report, they won't go in the report. So even though, I mean, for me, obviously it's fascinating for me, but it's even more fascinating if I can share that with the public, because it slowly will change the public's perception of the subject. And that's why I spend some of my time writing these reports. There's no real money in it, I mean, if there was, I mean, some people, I'm not saying that not every, I mean, there are some people out there who have earned money off it, but usually they charge an extortionate amount for assistance or lectures or whatever. And I don't want to do that, I'm never going to sell out to this, that's not my, and I'll be writing a book in due course and that sort of thing, and that's not to earn the money off the book. It's just another way of getting out the details to the public. So it's fascinating. It's a job outside of my normal job.
Yeah, and like you say, it's not about the money. Even if you earn a few quid off your book, so what? It takes time. Researching this stuff, if you're traveling.
From what I've heard about authors releasing books these days, I'll be happy if I break even.
Exactly, even the same on YouTube. You're going to need a lot of views, a lot of subs to even think you can give up your job, never let alone
Oh yeah, that's the lucky few. With the YouTube thing, with the advertising, Yeah, it's the lucky few will earn enough from that
Exactly.
to start doing
Yeah.
that full time. For
Yeah.
everybody else, it remains an interesting hobby.
Yeah. I think anybody, you put this amount of time in and this research, and you can see on your website all the stuff that's on there. It's not an overnight thing. It's something you've been putting a lot of time into, and that you don't get money from that. It's a kind of personal gain, if anything.
Well, yeah, man, I lose money because I'm paying sort of petrol costs to visit people. I don't visit people a lot of the time because obviously I can talk with them on Skype or whatever. But if it's a big case, and I mean some of the bigger contact cases, I've sat with people for over 50 hours to document all their experiences. We've literally gone over sort of multiple days back to back, witness drawings, going out to locations where things have happened. But it's so fascinating hearing it firsthand off people.
Oh
And
God,
hearing
yeah,
about these incredible things that they're seeing. When you
yeah,
talk to them for that amount of time, the validity of what they're saying comes through. There's no reason at all for somebody to sit and waste 50 hours of their life talking a load of nonsense with me that's just made up. And when they're talking as well, you can ask them questions and they'll just come up with the answers like that. Because it's just from there.
it's
It's not
there.
like they're having to consider their answers before
Yeah,
saying it. I mean, I have had alarm bells going sometimes. There are certain reports. There's even big reports that I've written. I've written long reports before and then pulled them at the last minute because there's been alarm bells going off. For example, you may have a multiple witness case where you can talk to one witness and 10 people saw the thing. And then when you ask to speak with the other 9, there's different excuses for why you can't talk with the other 9. Yeah. And the more you look into that, the more you're like, yeah, it's I'm solely going on the one person's testimony and that's it. And that's not good enough for me as a researcher. It's fine if people don't want to talk to me. I've spoken with multiple witness cases where only one person's happy to talk. That's absolutely fine because obviously everybody's opinionated on the subject. Some people might be scared about talking about it or just not want to go there, and that's absolutely fine. But with a case with lots and lots of people, you'd expect to at least be able to talk with several people about what happened. And a
yeah,
lot of the time where there's 2 people. So, for example, the Abergavenny photo, I spoke with the wife as well. That's another reason why the case is genuine, because why involve the wife at all if you've faked an image and she didn't actually see it with her own eyes? Then really she's just basically like a loose end that you'd need to tie up. And
yeah,
instead her viewpoints matched his own.
yeah.
Again, you just got to use logic with the way that people say things and what they tell you. And you
Mm,
can usually work out. There's not as many hoaxes as people think there is. Some people probably think that that all these UFOs are all hoaxes all the time. There are big YouTube channels that constantly release fake UFO videos and fake UFO stories and put them online. And we've gone full circle and we're talking about YouTube advertising again. So they've got channels set up, and the more hits they get, the more subscribers they get, and all that, the more money they get off the advertising. So therefore, they're just pushing out all these fake stories and fake videos all the time.
yeah,
It's ridiculous. It's gone stupid. The amount
mm,
of mud that you've got to wade through to get to the real stuff out there, and that's another reason why I do what I do, because I want people to realise that I am the real deal. I'm not in this to earn any money or fame for myself. I don't care how much fame and fortune I ever get from this. Yeah, what I do want people to care about is that the sighting reports that I put on are the real deal, the real facts I've had off people that haven't been elaborated on, or or I haven't blown them out of all proportion or added extra bits to them. They are what they've said and
yeah,
what's been reported. And
yeah,
then I'll usually weigh up why they're not mundane. I'll usually say it's not a balloon because of this, definitely not a satellite because of this, etc. Just clarifying that and the reason why it's something out of the ordinary rather than something mundane. And there are
mm,
case reports where it is something mundane, and I've got to the end of it and I've said, yeah, I believe it was probably a balloon.
yeah.
But
Everybody has to do their own, research and look into things a bit more. Even those that are watching these, clickbait videos.
yes, very,
You
very
can't
well.
make a judgment on a one video, which a lot of people do. Just make a judgment on the thought of someone seeing an alien or a ship, and
That's
you
it.
know,
Yeah, that's it. I mean, yeah, a lot of the time you've just got the video to go on. You haven't got any. Or there might be some words with the video, but you can't prove those words. They're just kind of random words fished out of somebody's mind that go along with the video. You
yeah,
can't tell if what you're looking at there is a real thing. Unless you've got a detailed case report of a trusted source. I'd like to hope that in the UFO community, I'm known as a trusted source. I believe I am largely. Now, with that, you're getting all the facts there. If there's photos, there's photos. If there's videos, there's videos. If there's if there's no photos and videos, there'll usually be witness drawings, like some of the ones you showed earlier on in the case reports. Where they've decided to create those. So I get whatever I can from the case, put it all together, and then just release it to the public. People can view it if they want to view it. If they don't want to view it, that's absolutely fine. A lot of people go on with their daily life and don't give two hoots about whether UFOs are real or not. Yeah, but because it doesn't affect them directly. They might not have ever had a sighting. They may never have a sighting for their whole life. It may never affect them directly. But whether I had that sighting in 2009, I mean, I've always been fascinated with the idea of the reality of the subject. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized it was real.
Yeah.
Long before I started doing the investigation directly.
I agree with you. Just going back to, people's accounts are much more important than the photos and the videos.
A photo or video backs up the testimony, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's great to got both. But...
Oh, got a question from Andy Gone Fishing. Have you heard or seen any smiling man encounters?
I know exactly what they're talking about with this. No, I haven't. No, not directly. But the closest thing we've got is that case I talked about earlier on, where the one of the greys that abducted somebody gave him a toothy smile. Now that could have been just a memory thing, not that they actually did that. These encounters of sort of shadowy forms with sort of smiles, not actually. That hasn't come out in the cases I've investigated so far. Not to say it wouldn't. Maybe tomorrow it will.
You never know, do you?
Yeah.
So we've covered quite a lot, but we've still got these other sketches.
You want to go through that? Okay.
I want to go through those, and are you still all right for time?
Of course, yeah.
I'll
talk
do
about
it
the
then.
subject forever.
Well, hang on. There's one intriguing photo, and this is like a manor house.
Oh yeah, that's what we're going to discuss. That's the location of this. What we're going to discuss.
Right.
That's
okay.
You can put that up actually. I'll start telling people what this one is about. We're back to the Glasgow case. Now I do apologise if any of you get creeped out by this next next tale. It's a bit spooky. It's pretty darn creepy, to be fair. Okay, so as I say, this is a repeat contact case. The gentleman from Glasgow, Rob, he's had lots of experiences throughout his life. This incident happened in the late 90s. Now, what you're looking at is a place called Blair Vadach Manor House. It's on the northern side of Gare Loch, which is northwest of the town of Rue in Scotland. Okay. And basically, this is close to where the incident took place. So what happened is, by this time he was in his sort of mid-20s, and he used to go out on the loch fishing with his friends in a boat. Quite near to Blair Vadach is actually a boating centre. So they set off from there and they go out onto the loch and go fishing in the day, and then in the evening kind of come back in. One of his friends, his father owned a caravan, and that caravan was on the grounds of Blair Vadach Manor. So there was numerous fields around, and quite close to the edge of the grounds. It was a grassy field, and the caravan was situated there. He'd been allowed to put it there. It wasn't a caravan park; it was just the caravan with an open field behind them. And they were right next to the hedge. Other side of the hedge, you've got the A814, which is the road that runs along the side of the loch, and then directly opposite that road, you've got the boating centre and then the loch itself. So what happened on the day of this incident? They'd all been out fishing, and it started to light rain, so they decided to give it a miss and head back to the caravan. So they went back to the caravan. It was late evening time. They were all up, just sitting, chatting in the caravan. May have had a beer. Not. I don't believe alcohol had any bearing on what happened here. They weren't drunk or anything, you know. They were just sitting there, and it was about 11:30 at night. And the main end window of the caravan was open, and the two one of the side windows, the curtain was also open, and on the other one the curtain was closed, so they had a view out to the road. And all of a sudden, one of his friends notices a figure in the distance on the far side of the hedge, coming along the pavement. in the direction of them through the window coming along the road. Now the weird thing with this is the field they were on was up from the road surface. It was up a number of feet. I think you're going to show it now. Yeah. Okay. It was up a number of feet from the road surface. So if this figure really was walking along the path, it would have been about 12 foot high, which obviously didn't make any sense.
Right.
As soon as Rob saw it, he saw it, and it was in the distance, like you can see there, like they've drawn it first of all, and he just saw this figure. They couldn't tell who or what it was. It was just a figure. And immediately his brain puts two and two together. His brain thinks it's a person hanging out of a sunroof of a car that for some reason has driven up onto the pavement. Yeah. So they're up at a high level, and they can see the torso and the head of the person above the hedge. If his brain thinks that's what this must be, why the car would drive along the pavement or whatever. So he starts looking at underneath the hedge to see if he can see any car lights. Okay, but there's no car lights, and this figure is just coming nearer and nearer. And as it gets nearer, they realize it's kind of gliding. It doesn't appear to be even kind of walking. It's more just kind of floating along, just drifting slowly in their direction. As it gets a bit nearer, gets sort of about halfway across the picture, say, and it hits him, and he realizes it's the grey that they saw back in 1971. Him and his brother saw.
Oh wow!
It's wearing the same things. It's wearing the same dark gown. Now they can see its face. He never saw its face last time, but he knows it's the same being.
Wow!
And he says to his friends, and his friends can see it too. So it's not just him who's seeing this. His friends in the caravan can see it too. The other two people there. So he says, "That's it. That's what I saw. That's the guy we saw back in 1971."
Wow!
They're just staring at it, and it's coming along the pavement. Now, this next drawing they've done here, this is where it had gone past the main window. So it had gone out the way of the main window, but as I said, the side window is still open. So they're still looking at it. As you can see, they're quite close to the hedge and the road where this thing was. And as it comes, it's now about 10 foot away from them outside the caravan. And it's still gliding along without stopping. And as it comes level with them, side on, its head slowly twists sideways and looks directly at them. He said it was like the creepiest thing.
Wow!
And it had these. He described it as black sunken eyes. It was basically grey with black eyes, but he didn't. He said it was kind of skull-like, with like a pale-coloured head and these dark holes, which were its eyes. But he described them as kind of sunken sockets. Okay, so it's moving along, and it just carries on. It doesn't stop or start to come towards the van. It just keeps going, and it's lost from sight outside the edge of the left side of the window.
Wow!
And then immediately afterwards, within a second, there's thuds start happening around the caravan. Yeah, there's vibrations, there's thudding sounds, and the cameras and the caravans visibly doing this around them, and they're like, "What's going on?" And they realise that the sounds and the vibrations are coming from the other side of the caravan. Now this has got the curtain down, hasn't it? So they couldn't see it. But one of his friends creeps towards the window, and he pulls up the curtain. And what they saw was a sheep. It was a sheep's face pushed up against the glass of the caravan.
Oh God!
The thuds were its legs bashing off the outside of the caravan. It was screaming. It was making like screaming type noises as it was frightened. And it was a few feet off the ground, being pushed into the outside of the window. Obviously, he backs off in terror. He's like, "What is going on?" And the curtain drops back down. As soon as the curtain drops back down, everything stops. There's no sound, vibrations stop, everything is deadly quiet. They don't go and look. They don't go and look. They're terrified about what's going on. They're scared this being is going to come into the caravan or something. They don't know what to do. One of his friends was particularly frightened by the situation and started to panic. And he ran around the caravan looking through all the drawers. He found some of that blue safety rope in one of the drawers, and he got it, and he went right around the caravan, tying up all the doors and all the windows of the caravan so that all the latches were all tied down. And then when he'd done that, he went and sat cross-legged underneath the end table and just didn't say a word.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, pretty terrifying event. And as I'm sure you could put yourself in that situation, and they're in the middle of nowhere on their own in a darkened field, and this is all going on. The three of them don't know what to do, and they sit up all night talking about it for hours. And Eventually, the morning light comes. It gets about 6:30, and the morning light starts to come up, and they decide they're going to go. So they exit the caravan. Outside, there's no sign of any sheep or anything, dead or alive, just no sheep, and no being or anything like that. And they walk all the way back to Rue and catch a bus home, and that's the end of that encounter. But it's absolutely there's so many interesting aspects to what took place there. Yeah. Now, talking with Rob in depth about that, I've got no doubt at all that this took place. Yeah, we've got no physical evidence to back it up. It's just his testimony. But believe when I say this, I spoke with him in great depth about this. He's in his late 50s now. I could tell he was talking about something that actually happened. Saw the little details he gave. Now, what's going on with the the being? Why didn't it? Why did it appear in the first place? The same being that he'd seen years and years before. What was it doing there? Why did it glide along the path and not come in and abduct him and his friends or anything like that? Just went out of sight. What happened with the sheep? Now Rob's idea on that is that maybe it was trying to directly frighten them, possibly. Another idea is that the sheep was being abducted, or that it was caught in some kind of energy, like maybe there was a craft hovering over the caravan and the sheep was picked up in this force or whatever and was being pushed into the glass. We don't have the answers to that. There's the animal mutilation phenomena that goes on. We haven't talked about that in our chat today. That's where farm animals are usually farm animals, sometimes pets as well, but usually farm animals are found with sort of parts of them removed, often the jaw flesh, small holes. Appears to be done directly. A lot of the time UFOs are seen before or after the animal's found. It's my belief that it's got direct links with the UFO phenomena. Now, with that, you could say, okay, the sheep was, was involved in something like that. But in animal mutilation cases, they find the carcasses. There was no sheep there. So
yeah, I've seen the. It's usually, isn't it, a very straight line, lasered probably.
Lower jaw.
The same. I mean, why are they doing the same thing over and over? This is what really.
Yeah. So what people theorize is going on with that, and we can't say for definite, is that those particular parts are being taken away for maybe environmental testing of some kind. Like they take the same types of flesh and then they're testing chemicals within it. Other people suggest that maybe they're feeding off it in some way and taking biological material to feed off or something. Obviously, it's a very, very controversial aspect of the UFO subject, a very, very dark aspect. I've seen evidence that it's real and it is involved in UFOs. I'm not saying I've seen an animal mutilation. I've dealt with a couple of cases where we thought that potentially it could have been a mutilation, but I don't think they were. I think there were false alarms and it was just dead animals. But the subject does have cover-ups going on with it. People are looking heavily into the mutilation phenomena, have gone looking for autopsy reports of these animals that have been taken that they would almost always be able to get hold of. But lo and behold, when they ask for the autopsy reports of these animals, they're not allowed them. They hit brick walls and aren't. There's obviously some kind of cover-up going on with it. So then you have to say, well, if there's a cover-up going on with it, that shows us something real about it, and it's not just misidentifications of rotting animals. Sometimes the animals are found a few days after, and you could say that some of the cases could have been sort of biological or predators removing bits. But in other cases, the animals found the following morning after, and it's just got these same wounds on. Then you've got the whole human mutilation side of things, where humans have been found in certain cases with exactly the same wounds on as other animals. Now that's a very, very dark side to the UFO subject. But if that's really going on, and that is a real part of it, you can understand why there would be a cover-up and why they wouldn't want to reveal that information to the public. It's one thing saying that UFOs are up there flying around, but a whole other thing if they're injuring animals and maybe people.
Yeah, I found a mutilated sheep. It was weird. It was wedged between a wall and a tree.
Yes.
And it had a very straight. I'll see if I can find the picture of it. It's just a very weird place to find it. In a very small wood, like tiny wood, literally. Yeah. And there's a lot of bones in there, sheep's heads, odd bones. And this sheep was stuck between this tree and a wall, and half of its jaw, straight line.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll see if I can find it while you're.
It's quite hard to. It's without examining the carcasses in depth. It's quite because there is particular biological elements that can do that. And it can be caused by by natural predation or whatever. So you have to be very, very careful with the mutilation phenomena, and some of them are almost certainly going to be sort of false alarms on things like that. But again, there's enough links with the UFO subjects. Farmers have seen a UFO hovering over their field, and then in the morning there's a mutilated cow or multiple. There's spates of it have gone on in America where they've found 50 cows and that sort of thing. It's really bizarre. It seems to come and go. It is going on in this country still, and it's still occurring. It's just not reported on the news.
Yeah.
Probably because they're trying to keep it under wraps. I mean, to an extent, the same thing applies to abductions, doesn't it? Because they really wouldn't want to admit to the public that these beings can take you from your own house or from your own car or just while you're walking around at will. There's nothing you can do to stop it from happening, and they can't do anything to stop it from happening. They're not going to want to openly admit that. So the recent admissions by the Pentagon and everything saying if you're not aware, if anybody watching is not aware of that, you definitely want to look into that because it's fascinating. So there's a few gun camera footage, pieces of footage have gone live, and to all intents and purposes, I believe that they're the real deal. It's actual military personnel capturing objects, performing incredible maneuvers, right-angle turns, shooting up thousands of feet in seconds, that sort of thing. They've confirmed them as genuine. They say that they are genuine things that have occurred, and that they are vehicles that are outmaneuvering, outperforming the military. So in a way, they've said that UFOs exist and are real. They haven't said the alien word. They haven't said they're alien. But if they're not American, and America have got the best, the most highly classified and best military in the world, if they're not American, whose are they? Very unlikely to be Russian or Chinese or anybody else's. It's from outside. And other countries are getting these sightings as well, and their military are looking into it in exactly the same way. So it's not with any military. So it's disclosure with a small d, basically. So they haven't said the big alien word. But if they say that it's real, and let's say they know what's going on with the contact subjects, they're not going to willingly admit that to the public, because the public are then going to say, well, stop it from happening, and they'll have to say we can't. And nobody would feel safe again.
No.
My parents are an interesting one. My parents both quite skeptical originally. My father, I convinced that UFOs are a real thing. He now attends BUFOG meetings and everything. He just came along to a conference with me. I said, okay, if it's real, if it's not real, come and see for yourself. Come along to a conference and you'll see. And within halfway through the conference, he knew. My father's a very intelligent man. Now, my mother, she doesn't want to know. She doesn't want to know about the subject because it's quite frightening. It's quite disturbing in a way. And I can understand that, that a lot of people don't want to go down that path because of these darker elements of the subject. Because it's not just craft flying around. There's direct interaction going on with the human race. And it's going to be hard for a lot of people to grasp that.
Definitely. Well, look, got time for one more question. Crop circles, what do you think?
Okay, I think the majority of crop circles are very nice art pieces. I believe that there's definite evidence there are big groups of crop circle makers. This would also explain why the complexity of crop circles has gone up over time. This started off with basic circles, then you had your kind of multiple circles, then you had your very, very complex, massive formations, some of which appeared over numerous nights in a row, so part of it would appear and then other parts. Now, the very interesting thing with the crop circle phenomena is there's something going on with that a lot of people don't realize, and that is that the crop circle making groups themselves have actually had weird paranormal stuff type stuff go on when they've gone out to purposely make crop circles. There's one particular one. They were going to create a crop circle formation that looked like a large dagger in the field, and they'd mapped out plans for it, and they've actually released the actual plans for this crop circle they were going to create in this field as an art piece. And what happened is they went out there to create this crop circle, and halfway through creating it in the middle of the night, just a group of them out there with torches or whatever making it, they said they saw a massive, tall, shadow-like creature or being or something standing in the crop, and they were terrified, and they actually gave up on finishing the crop circle. And then a couple of days later, it went out in the news, and what they showed was images of their half-completed crop circle, and they were like, "What is this weird shape?" And it was half of the dagger, and they hadn't finished the pattern because they'd been frightened off. Some of them believe that they're actually being led to create these things, so indirectly, the beings are kind of leading them in a way to create these patterns.
Right.
Which is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like fake and not fake at the same time.
Yeah.
But there's also other elements of crop circles that I find fascinating, and one of those is the military connection. So it's been proven time and time again that the military have an interest in crop circles. Yeah. So after crop circles have appeared in fields and everything, there's plenty of footage of black unmarked military helicopters appearing over the fields where these crop circles have been created. Now, if they're just art pieces, why would the military be interested in them? You have to ask yourself that. So
yeah.
I think there's a reality to the subject, and I believe that some of the formations that have appeared are probably the real deal and are in some ways linked with UFOs. There are also numerous accounts of people seeing kind of glowing orbs of light and things over the fields, and then finding a crop circle the next morning and that sort of thing. So I think it's both going on at once. You have to be very, very wary. There's a lot of forgeries going on with it. There's groups that have gone full public that you can find out about online. You can even I mean, it's obviously illegal what they're doing, but you could join it and join forces with them and go and make one if you wanted to. I'm not saying that I'd want you to do that, definitely not. But I think there's a reality to the subject as well. There's a deep reality to it, and it does have links with the UFO subject. Exactly what those links are, I can't say.
No.
But some of the evidence that's come out from some of these things, where they've looked into it in depth and they've found kind of pieces of corn that are kind of blown out at the nodes with extreme heat and this sort of thing. It's stuff that goes way beyond even kind of laying out, because some of the bigger formations, would have to be done by digitally mapping which parts of the crop and how much to lower it by, and they're using very advanced techniques to do that to an accurate level, and it looks spectacular.
Oh God, they're so complex and accurate. That you just wonder how the heck they're doing it.
It's absolutely wild. And some of the bigger ones, you've had have probably been done by massive teams of people, and they've gone out there from sundown to sunup and spent the whole night putting it together, and it looks absolutely wild. But as I say, I wouldn't dismiss it entirely. I think that would be silly to dismiss it entirely as just hoaxes. The information with the crop circle groups and them seeing the paranormal thing, again, is a very, very fascinating angle to it that not many people are aware of. But you can find interviews online of crop circle makers talking about the things that have happened to them.
Right.
It's quite interesting.
It is interesting. It all is. I mean, there's so much information out there, and I know you love to talk about it. Why don't we do a part 2 sometime? Because we've gone for 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll happily take you through other cases. We can talk about some of the other aspects that we haven't touched on much tonight.
Yeah.
I can tell you about. There's one case that had a video, for example, a video of an abduction actually taking place.
Wow.
Video footage. So I can talk about that and take you through that.
Definitely. I think we've had loads tonight to absorb. But everyone, go and check out Dave's the website. I've put the link up. I'll put it up again now. The BUFOG.com.
So our website is where I put all my case reports. There's also a wealth of other UFO related media and all sorts of things on there to check out. Then we've got our Facebook groups. Our Facebook, we've got 2 Facebook pages. We've got our usual group page where I'll put details of upcoming meetings. Obviously, at the moment, due to the lockdown, there's no meetings going on at the moment. We've also got our Facebook community page where we chat regularly about stuff. So that's a good way of getting in touch with myself, with other group members. You can post pictures and videos. You can ask questions, talk about your experiences in there. It's called BUFOG Truth Seekers. And we recently hit over 1,000 people in the group. I think it's about 1,100 people in the group. So happy for anybody. I'm the only admin. So if you connect, I'll add you in. And obviously, the only rule is just keep the chat around sort of paranormal type stuff and don't spam or drop spam all over the place. Other than that, I'm happy it's quite an open chat.
I've put all the links. sorry, all the links are in the description anyway. I've already put them in. I'm just putting them now in the live chat if anyone wants to go and check them out. I've also put your email in, which is Birmingham UFO group at gmail.com. Everyone go and check them out and see what the website's really good. You've got a lot of stuff on there.
I recently rebuilt the website about a year ago because it was starting to look pretty old. Needed a
bit dated.
Needed a new cover for it. So yeah, that should work fully on either PC or mobile phones.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a sighting report form on there. There's all the contact details. If you don't want to fill in the form, you can get in touch with me directly. My phone number's on there. You can ring me. I don't mind. I'll happily talk to you about your experiences. If you want me to write a report, I can probably write a report after going over stuff with you. If you don't want me to write a report and you just want to chat or ask questions, go ahead.
Great. Brilliant. Well, we'll definitely get together again soon. We'll do it part 2 because I know you've got so much more to share with us. Thanks again for your time for coming on tonight. I really enjoyed learning more about the Birmingham UFO group, which I haven't got a clue about. It's really only down the road from me. So everyone, I think I'm going to be here on Sunday night. I don't know who my guest is going to be, but keep your eyes peeled for a post in YouTube. And if not, I'll see you over on the Researchers Report on Wednesday night with Kerry. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks to everyone who put some questions forward. I'm sorry if I missed any of them, but I do appreciate you being there and doing that for us. All right, everyone, have a good night and take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dave.